All right, we're live.
Okay, we're back after break. So we're still working on S22. And I think it would be helpful, Jen, to go through the bill now that we've heard testimony and we have maybe a better understanding of what the bill is doing. Let's go through the bill, and then we've heard suggestions from one or two folks about sections that might be changed. So we'll look for those.
Great. Okay, so you had asked if I would put up the language. Is that right?
Yes, please.
Okay, let me do that. All right. Are you able to see that?
Right. Now, what I'm going to suggest to committee is, as we're going through, I can't see you all, so just speak up, please.
Okay, so this is S22, which we've been talking about. And it is entitled An Act Relating to Healthcare Practitioners Administering Stem Cell Products Not Approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. And it would create a new chapter in Title 18, Chapter 87, called Stem Cell Products. It starts out with some definitions. The first being a healthcare practitioner. So that's someone licensed by the Board of Medical Practice or by a board attached to OPR to provide professional healthcare services in the state. And then there's a definition of stem cell products that I'm still working on making some potential revisions to. So I will bring you a new definition, working with some folks offline. The current one is based in part on an existing federal definition, but there's a confusing use of terminology in here that sort of reuses some of the language from the federal regulation in a way that's not particularly instructive. So we'll revisit the definition. Then we get into what the bill requires. So first is notice. Requires a healthcare practitioner who administers one or more stem cell products that are not approved by the FDA to provide each patient with the following written notice, so it already provides it, prior to administering any such product to the patient for the first time. It would say this notice must be provided to you under Vermont law. This healthcare practitioner administers one or more stem cell products that have not been approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. You are encouraged to consult with your primary care provider prior to having an unapproved stem cell product administered to you. It requires that written notice to be in at least 8.5 by 11 inch paper and printed in not less than 40-point type, and to include information on methods for filing a complaint with the applicable licensing authority and for making a consumer inquiry. I think it's this piece about consumer inquiry where the AG's office has some suggestions about modifying the language. I can't recall, and so maybe others who worked on this last year can remember if it was more than just the AG's Consumer Protection Division that was being contemplated here as far as a consumer inquiry. Can't recall if it was supposed to be something broader than that. So if others have a recollection, let me know. Yes.
I think that Jill Abrams, who is here with us, was going to offer some suggestions, and I think on that section. So
right, so that's what I was getting to, is that she was asking if that means filing a complaint with the AG's office. If so, it might be helpful to be more specific. And what I'd like others to remind me is whether it was that language was included after committee discussion last year and after testimony from a number of witnesses. And I don't recall if it was specific to a complaint to the Attorney General's office or if there were other potential avenues for the consumer inquiry as well. So if it's supposed to be broader than just the Attorney General's office, we might want to leave the language. If it was specific just to the Attorney General's office, then I agree it would be helpful to be more specific there.
Okay, so your request is going out to?
Yes, my request is going out to those on the call or those watching at home.
So, but most importantly, to the AG's office, your request is going AG's office, Office of Professional Regulation, Medical Practice Board. Okay.
Yes. And anyone else. I sort of have a recollection of where we were all sitting in the
Right.
room at the time, but I don't remember exactly who was there.
Yes, it's deja vu all over again.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so that's what's required for the notice that actually gets provided to the patient. It also requires the healthcare practitioner to prominently display the written notice along with the information about filing a complaint and making a consumer inquiry at the entrance and in an area visible to patients in the healthcare practitioner's office. Then as far as disclosure, it would require a healthcare practitioner who administers stem cell products that are not approved by the FDA to provide a disclosure form to a patient for the patient's signature prior to each administration of an unapproved stem cell product. The disclosure form would state in language the patient could reasonably be expected to understand the stem cell product's FDA approval status. And then it requires the healthcare practitioner to retain the patient's medical record, a copy of each disclosure form signed and dated by the patient. So that was disclosures. We've looked at notice and disclosure, and now we have advertisements. This would require a healthcare practitioner to include that notice that was spelled out in subdivision A1 in any advertisements relating to the use of stem cell products not approved by the FDA. For print advertisements, the notice must be clearly legible and in a font size not smaller than the largest font size used in the advertisement. And for all other forms of advertisements, the notice must either be clearly legible in a font size not smaller than the largest font size used in the advertisement or clearly spoken. And then finally, in this section, we have non-applicability. It says the provisions of this section do not apply to the following. So the notice, disclosure, and advertisement requirements do not apply to a healthcare practitioner who has obtained approval or clearance for an investigational new drug or device from the FDA for the use of stem cell products, or a practitioner who administers a stem cell product pursuant to an employment or other contract to administer stem cell products on behalf of or under the auspices of an institution certified by the Foundation for the Accreditation of Cellular Therapy, the National Institutes of Health Blood and Bone and Marrow Transplant Clinical Trials Network, or AABB, formerly known as the American Association of Blood Banks. Oh, and then a violation of this section constitutes unprofessional conduct under both the OPR and Board of Medical Practice statutes. That's what those references are. And then it goes into those two statutes, section 2 being OPRs, to add to the list of what constitutes unprofessional conduct for a healthcare practitioner failing to comply with one or more of the notice, disclosure, or advertising requirements in section 1 for administering stem cell products not approved by the FDA. And similarly, for the Board of Medical Practice, failing to comply with one or more of the notice, disclosure, or advertising requirements in what is in section 1 for administering stem cell products not approved by the FDA. Section 4 is that rulemaking advanced directive language that you heard recommendations from both Cindy Berzesi and David Herlihy to take out of the bill. This language had said that the Department of Health would amend its rules on advanced directives to further clarify the scope of experimental treatments to which an agent may and may not provide consent on behalf of a principal, and to have those take effect not later than January 1st of next year. And the act itself would take effect on July 1st.
Okay, thank you. I do have a question. When Lauren Hibbert was testifying, she referenced 3 VSA 127 as unauthorized practice, and then yeah. And so which is it, 127 or 129A?
So this is, and if Lauren's still on, I'm happy to let her speak for herself, but this is unprofessional conduct as opposed to unauthorized practice.
Got it.
So this is conduct by licensees. If somebody is practicing without a license, I would expect that would fall under the
Got it.
unauthorized practice.
So, but we don't
I don't know
need
if you
to
want to hear
reference
anything
that?
from Lauren. I don't believe, I mean, I think that's inherent in the existing unauthorized practice statute. So I think she was answering a different question about people who are practicing without having a license.
She was shaking her head no, and I scrolled down and found her. That's good. All right.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
question. On the section 4, the rulemaking, that one of the witnesses, and now I can't remember if it was Dr. Bruzzese or Mr. Herlihy or who it was, that said that they recommend taking that out. But I'm just wondering, why was this in here originally, and what would be the result of taking it out?
I can't. Go ahead, Jen.
The bill as introduced last year was a bit different in its scope, and I think there had been some concerns at that point about whether an agent under an advance directive could consent to somebody or consent to have the principal receive these treatments on the principal's behalf. And it really turned into more of an informed or a notice and disclosure bill, rather than I think the focus had been more on informed consent in the earlier version. So it's not, I mean, you could put something in here on it, but what I think you were hearing was that it didn't seem as necessary given the changed scope of the bill.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, Jen.
So unless I hear differently from folks, I think that we can assume that section 4 will not be included in the next draft.
Okay.
I mean, we did hear from, and Jen, you mentioned it, so.
Senator Lyons?
Yes, Senator
Thank you. Jen, the notice given to the patient or the client at each essentially appointment, is that so? If somebody have to go back for the treatment time after time, they would be given this notice every time.
So the notice is before administering a product to the patient for the first time. So the notice is given to them the first time. The disclosure is given to them each time.
And secondly, the ads, I like the idea of the font size. Does it say within the ads?
Yeah, so it says it must be in a font size not smaller than the largest font size used in the advertisement.
But does it say that has to be within the same ad? Or can it be like on a different page? You know, I'm thinking if you're having, you know, the disclosure the same size as the large font, and you've seen the ads with these huge font sizes, I mean, how is that going to be? You know, they're going to have to adjust their ad sizes. Is this what I'm hearing?
Presumably, not knowing what the size is that they've been using, I think in order to comply at least with the spirit of this, it would need to be clearly part of the same advertisement. I mean, some of that may be an enforcement question for those who would be enforcing this, but I think to read and understand the intent of this language, I think it would be potentially misleading to have your disclaimer on, 6 pages later than that.
Okay.
I also think arguably then it's a different ad.
Any other questions here? All right. Okay. Why don't we take the bill down for a minute and just see where we are and have a conversation very briefly. This looks like, given also that right now we're seeing some COVID related treatments, and not the least of which is that the Missouri physician who I put an article in, and it's on our webpage, and Nellie, maybe you could move it up to today, move that article up today about the use of this type of stem cell injection for COVID treatment, which is a little bit concerning, to say the least. So it does pull us, all of which to say it does bring this bill into the pandemic environment, among other things. So questions that you all have for any of our expert witnesses, because they really are expert witnesses today, and we're fortunate to have them in our state. And I include in that Jen Carby. Any questions? We're feeling comfortable. Senator Ruth Hardy?
Thank you, Senator Ginny Lyons. The testimony has been extremely helpful today, and you're right, we are lucky to have these folks help us work through this complicated situation. My question more is, you know, not wanting to belabor this, but wondering if there are any people from the patient's perspective who maybe have been harmed by this products, or, you know, what sort of from a patient's perspective are we hearing, and whether or not this from their perspective would be effective, you know, our remedy through this bill. And also, you know, just on the interest of, have we heard any, did you hear any testimony from people who've done this, these clinics, who are practitioners who've provided this, and what they have to say about why they're doing this? I mean, not to legitimize what they're doing, but just, you know, in the effort of trying to get, you know, full
So,
testimony.
yes, I will say that, first of all, last session, there was a great deal of contention around the bill. And we did invite Dr. Fenton to come in and testify last time, and he did. And the people in the room became extremely emotional and passionate about the bill as it was introduced. The bill has changed significantly, and now you have testimony on your webpage in the documents section from Dr. Fenton, who does run and own the clinic in Winooski, so you can read that.
Okay.
Whether or not we can actually get a patient in, I don't know, but I think we've heard reference from different people about patient concerns, and I'm going to turn to Dr. Weiss to let him comment on that.
So it's a great question, but let me twist it for you. One of the advertising techniques most frequently utilized by these clinics are patient testimonials. And so the way that's done is to cherry pick out of the many, many, many patients that might have received a given treatment, the few that had some sort of benefit. But then it's not clear at all whether the fact that they're feeling better for whatever concern that they address the clinic with is really reflective of the fact that they got some sort of treatment. There are all types of things that could have made them feel better. So patient testimonial, the point being, is a double-edged sword, right?
Right. Let me clarify what I meant actually, is more from the perspective of, you know, we put these kinds of requirements in place hoping that they will be effective, and do we know from the perspective of patients that they are effective? And so sort of, maybe I'm not being clear. I wasn't suggesting that we have sort of patient testimonials about how great these things are. It was more like, you know, is there something we might be missing when we're thinking about this from the perspective of a patient, in terms of how we can help them have informed consent and understand the sort of goal that we have as a state to, you know, protect patients and limit these unprofessional practices. Do you understand what I mean?
Well, Cindy's going to speak more eloquently than I am about this, but the philosophy is that at the end of the day, you cannot tell a patient, we're not aiming to tell patients what they should or shouldn't do. What we want to do is provide the most up-to-date, useful information to help them make their own informed decision. That's a critical distinction. But then in terms of patients out there who feel that they may have benefit, Cindy's point is very good along the lines that there is legitimate research with stem cells. And hopefully some way down the road, we're going to figure out how to make it work. So it's not to say that maybe something actually did work, but the mechanism, the approach being utilized is just simply wrong with these clinics.
Yeah,
I don't know if I'm getting to your.
misunderstanding my question. So
Let me try to rephrase your question, and I do think it is a Cindy Brzezzi question.
Yep.
So the question is, would patients see the informed consent process and the information being provided to the patient as a benefit? I think that's kind of where you were going, and you can
well,
clarify
not
that.
necessarily just a benefit, but would it help them make informed consent? Like, is it an effective measure? And, maybe this is a question for Lauren, because, we deal with these kinds of things all the time where we try to provide informed consent in a regulatory process that protects patients or individuals from harm. And do we have information from the patient perspective that shows that the efforts that we're trying to make are in fact effective? And that patients do see these consent forms or these advertisement warnings. And I mean, we have this long history of regulatory of this type of thing with tobacco products, actually. And is there research that shows that these particular measures in the medical field are effective? I'm trying to think like a patient and see if, this is, if we're doing enough and if we're targeting it correctly. So that was more my question.
So I'm happy.
Go ahead.
Oh, Cindy Brzezzi, Vermont Ethics Network. I'm happy to sort of speak generally about informed consent. And we just did a conference on this in November, a statewide conference on informed consent. And are we really doing a good job in general in medicine when it comes to informed consent? And I think resoundingly the word is no, not so much. I mean, I think it's very hard to communicate scientific information to a person that may not have a lot of health or medical savvy and expertise. And so what we are learning is that we need to do a better job, and we need to remind clinicians in particular that they have obligations not just to present the rosy side of a picture and what we hope and the hoped for goal or benefit, but they have obligations to talk about risks, to talk about alternatives, and to give people the full truth when it comes to anything that we are proposing, whether it's a stem cell product or a surgery or, use of, something for your high blood pressure. Like, we have these obligations to talk more thoroughly. And I think any one tool with it, just writing, just talking, like, we know that we need to give information in multiple ways and often over time. People need to hear things more than once for it to really sink in. So I think this all bodes well for raising the bar in terms of reminding clinicians and also putting information in front of patients so that they can even ask a question, because you don't know what you don't know. So if the keepers of the information are only spoon feeding elements that feed what they want to do, it doesn't even put you in a position to ask a question. So I think this is a really important positive step in the right direction, and we will continue to need to work on informed consent and how we do that better for everyone.
And one of the comments I think that you made during your testimony was how important it will be to engage primary care physicians, because they're going to be the link with whomever is maybe doing this. But Lauren, did you want to comment as well?
Lauren Hibbert, Director of the Office of Professional Regulation. I just wanted to add that I think this bill really carefully threads an enhanced informed consent. I think that this is above and beyond what most of us experience when we go to a doctor and sign the HIPAA release and the informed consent, even before surgery. It's more prescriptive than that. I think it will slow a patient down. I don't think it will stop some patients, because frequently they're just desperate. They're shelling out thousands and thousands of dollars, and they're desperate. And I'm not sure it's that balance that we've talked about in this topic of patients' rights and ability to seek treatment, even though the state may not approve of it, with notice of what they're paying for. So I think this is a really careful threading of that issue. The notice is prescriptive. We do have other professions that require notice of how to make a complaint. Mental health has been the one that is most frequent, although now massage therapy also is one that requires notice of how to complain about a practice to the Office of Professional Regulation. I do think that that's an effective tool. Before you go into a surgery and you're signing an informed consent about anesthesia, for instance, you're not given notice of how to complain about the conduct. So I think it's unusual enough that people will pay attention if we have any ability to get anybody to pay attention at all. That's the piece that I just want to be cautious about, because I think the patients who are brought to this type of practice are truly in a place of desperation and may not be able to hear what anyone's saying, whether it's, wallpapered on the wall and given to them, which is what this bill asks practitioners to do, is basically post it in 2 places. They still may not be able to hear it. But I hope that's answers your question, Senator Harvey.
Yeah, thank you both to both of you. That's exactly what I was trying to get at. And I think Dr. Bruzzese, your testimony about how, informed consent is a work in progress and there's more, just generally broadly is important. And I'm wondering if you think it would be helpful to add language to the bill or if it's already in there implied about working with primary care physicians to make sure that they understand their role in this.
I think, well, just a clarification, I'm not a physician. Just want to make sure people know.
I thought everybody was a doctor on this call.
I know, I play one frequently, but I'm not really one. And so I don't think there's any more that needs to be added to the bill on this front. I feel like this is largely an education issue in many respects. And I think we're doing a lot through the Medical Society and lots of other forums to really just kind of work on making sure that people have information, and Dr. Weiss and myself traveling around and just giving information and informal lectures to medical staff across the state has been one, I think, really important way that this is a very complicated science. And I think people don't know, even physicians that don't do it, don't really understand it. And so I think that's been very effective as well.
Thank you. And it's not only is it complicated science, it's changing every day. So, Senator Terenzini.
Thank you, Senator Lyons. I just had a couple of questions. As you know, I wasn't in the Senate last term. So this bill that you speak of that was a little more controversial than the model we're looking at today, did it advanced out of the Health and Welfare Committee?
The bill as we're looking at today, that we modified the bill as introduced. We ended up with the bill that we have today, and that bill made it to the Senate floor. So we passed it out of committee unanimously. It went to the Senate floor, and there it languished during COVID. So in September, we had to bring it back into committee. It was over. It was done.
Understood. And then is the House, are they currently looking at anything similar to this?
No. My conversation with the House committee is that we're gonna send this over to them.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's good, and look forward to voting on this. So
terrific. Any other questions now for our witnesses, and then I'm going to turn to Dr. Weiss for another minute.
Senator Lyons, just a question for you. Was there any consideration of having the disclosure form given, a copy of it given to the patient as well as being held in the patient's record?
I think we did talk about that. I don't remember exactly how that played out. Does anyone else remember that? Ann, do you remember? I don't either. Is that something that seems important to the committee?
I think it might help to, have patients have the form, know what they've signed, maybe read it when they get home and understand it more. I don't know.
Jen, is that something we can put in pretty quickly? Okay, why don't we do that and we'll look at that.
Sure. So you'd want the patient to receive a copy and then also to sign.
Receive a copy and the signed copy goes into the patient's files.
But there's also a copy to take.
And a copy to take. Dr. Weiss, does that make sense to you, or?
Well, Cindy will articulate this better, but
Okay.
it's standard practice for a patient to have a copy of a signed informed
Yeah.
consent for anything.
So I mean, the question is, do we need to be explicit in the bill around this? And I see a couple of heads going up and down, and I think because of the controversy around the practice that we're trying to regulate, it might be an advantage to have the patient walk home with it.
It's also not an informed consent. It is a disclosure. So to the
Right.
extent that that distinction feels important, if people might not treat it the same way.
Okay, so let's do that. Let's put that in. Good catch, Senator Hooker. We may as well sew it up as tight as we can. Anything else? Any other questions? Dr. Weiss?
So again, wanted to thank everybody for the consideration of this. With respect to the letter from Dr. Fenton, what is there are some considerations in that. I'm looking at it now. And is there a plan to respond or address to the points raised in that letter?
Well, he has, yeah, unless the committee has questions about it, we have asked him several times to appear before our committee and testify, and he's not available. So this serves as his testimony, and that's where it stays.
I see.
That's it.
Very good.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Committee, we're, Jen, on, I think I have you scheduled on Tuesday to possibly bring in a new draft as much as we can get, given your work on the definition. See if we can get there with that. And maybe we can look at this new draft on Tuesday and then get to a level of comfort to have a vote Tuesday or Wednesday. Probably Wednesday, given our rule. I don't want to break our rules. Okay, is that okay with you guys? Good. All right. All right. So I had a few things that I did want to talk with you about before we quit, and I want to quit a little bit early because we're on the floor at 11:30. So let's just take 5 minutes of our time. And this is really, for those of you who are testifying on the bill, we're finished with the bill for the day, and we're moving on to committee organization and getting ready for our next week of work. So thank you all. You've been really terrific. It's a fun group. In spite of the complexity, it's a fun group.
All right, thank you again.
Thanks.
And good
Yeah,
luck.
thank you, and take care. Yep, I'll see you Tuesday.
Great.
Yeah, okay. So, first of all, you probably have heard the announcement in your other committees, but in case you have not, crossover is February 12th. That's the Friday that we get back. Okay,
March
after
12th.
town meeting.
March,
What?
March 12th,
What did I say?
February. Can we go back and pick up a few
Oh,
days?
man.
Good.
That just shows you. Okay. I wish we could pick up a couple more weeks. So here's my goal before crossover, where I put my notes. My goal before crossover is to complete the work that we've done on the flexibility bill, which we've been working on, and we're coming back to. This bill, S-22. Then we also have S-48, which is the nurse compact bill. And if we can get to closure on that, we do have some testimony and time scheduled for each of these bills next week. Then S-24 is the vaping flavors bill. I would like to get that bill sort of wrapped up in our committee because I know two things. I know one, economic development is interested in having that bill back because we had it delivered to us from them. And then that bill would also absolutely will have to go to Senate Finance. So the timing on all of this is going to become tight. So we're going to be trying to act on those bills that I've mentioned, 22, 24, 48, and flexibility. Those are kind of key. There is another bill that we haven't spent time on, but was passed unanimously out of committee last session, and the House is looking forward to it, and that is the PFAS bill that does also have COVID implications because PFAS has now been implicated in greater risk for significant health effects from COVID. So we'll pick up on that bill a little bit as well. But we've had a lot of testimony and a lot of information. I'm scheduling time for the audio only next week so we can get to some place there. You will receive an email from Nellie. I've asked her to put together some testimony that will be on our webpage, and we'll have folks in. One of those is the National Governors Association white paper that Senator Cummings referenced. Another is some information from, Helen Laban's testimony, obviously, and some other information. I will say this, in reading through that and communicating with folks, I believe it was at a meeting perhaps of the National Governors Association or another organization on telemedicine, and I will find out which one, but Vermont was held up as best practice or being the most forward right now with telemedicine, so that was good news. So that's that. Senator Terenzini.
Thank you. That's a lot you just listed off in a short period of time, I understand. Do you think that we'll have time to, before crossover, look at our ALS registry bill that we came up with?
Good luck. No, I don't. I really don't. If we can, we will, because it's not a simple bill,
Right,
because
right.
the Department of Health is going to be deeply engaged in testimony on that one. And we do want that to go forward. But look, this is the first year of the biennium, and we have a lot of work to do. My personal favorite and primary goal is to work on healthcare reform, which I've been doing behind the scenes, but there's no time for us to do that the first year of the biennium. Absolutely. And the same with the registry. These are things that we all have things that are important. We've tried to focus on pandemic related issues or those things that increase risk related to COVID. But we'll do our best. And I'm glad you brought that bill up because it's a key bill. And I noticed the ALS was listed as one of the stem cell. Yeah, you saw that. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, Ruth. Senator Hardy.
Sure. Yeah. Whatever. CRF. We've talked about this yesterday in finance. So there's a bill APROPS is trying to move forward. So I'm wondering what you've heard from APROPS and what our role should be, because we're the healthcare for.
So I haven't heard anything further. I haven't heard anything further from APROPS. APROPS has been working more closely with education, and Senator Hooker and I have put our 2 cents in on the education piece that does relate to mental health recovery for kids. I am going to work on a possible letter to appropriations over the weekend, and I will share that with you. We've received information from primary care folks, and we've received information from yesterday, for example, on the recovery. We also know there's significant mental health needs. So we'll put something together, but to be honest with you, because appropriations hasn't asked us a question, doesn't mean that we can't have influence.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, I would hope that we would send them a letter from the committee.
That's what we're
I'm glad
looking
to
for.
hear that mental health was on my list of things, and also the recovery stuff we heard yesterday was very compelling, and it seems like that's a thing that we could have a big impact on those organizations with not a ton of money even. So given that people have overdosed than COVID in 2020, we really need to be focusing on that area.
Absolutely. And that I'm waiting to get information back from Peter Mallory and his group on recovery. So if we can get some data from them. It's remember that the tricky part of all of this is putting things in that will sort of bridge us over to the real budget. And anything that we put in can't be seen as going to the base funding for the organizations or the work that's going on. So it has to be based on COVID related needs. I, of all people, understand that we've had significant increased needs during this pandemic. Senator Cummings. Okay, so you're muted, Senator.
I'm putting my add to the picnic hat on.
Oh, good.
Senator Kitchell has made, there's all these wonderful programs and we want to fund them. But one of the reasons mental health, and Senator Kitchell makes this point frequently, is we are underfunding our base programs, the
Exactly.
state colleges being the big one. We're going to have to come up with over $25 million a year more as maintenance. We're going to have more than that to get them back on their feet. We have chronically underfunded the mental health system. And so that's why we're going to get pushed, because there are great programs out there, but we buckshot it. And at some point, somebody makes the really unpopular decisions, and it's usually appropriation.
Well, here's,
it's hard.
Yeah, no, we understand that. And honestly, last year we worked so hard with the CRF funding, and I think we came to a really good place. I think whether or not any of the suggestions on the chronic or acute needs that we see are met with the December funding, we will at least be highlighting them for future federal dollars. And as you said, the base funding that has just not been there. Or some of these things haven't been increased since 1997. So it's, anyway, yeah, thank
Reach
you.
Up amongst them. I think we got one small shot for Reach Up and one for mental health since about 97.
Exactly.
And you can't attract personnel to the state if you pay them subsistence wages. So it's because recovery came in yesterday. Have we got like a roadmap of who is delivering mental health services? So that we know how recovery fits in.
Recovery is not funded by the state, I don't believe.
Oh.
Well,
I said they got $10,000 or something last year, probably in CRF funds. But how do they fit in to the treatment system?
They don't.
Senator
Go
Lyons,
ahead.
I don't want to interrupt, but we do have 2 minutes to get to the Senate floor.
Thank you.
Oh, Senator Cummings, sorry. But this is
No, I'm bad.
No, we're going to come back to it. We will definitely come back to this conversation. It's a critically important one. Thank you. Jen, are we set? Nellie, we can go off You too.